Majesty the Queen is the most famous woman in the world. A monarch and head of state to over 120 million people, she has reigned now for 60 years. She is head of the Church of England, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, and proud possessor of some of the finest castles, palaces and jewels on earth. During her reign, she has worked with 12 British Prime Ministers and 12 Presidents of the United States. She is, as one royal author put it, the living embodiment of modern British history. But behind palace walls, there's an army of suppliers who help keep Her Majesty and the royal machine working. Carpenters, engravers, cabinet makers, and even chimney sweeps. Some are well-known companies, but many are not. They're the craftsmen and women who hold warrants as official suppliers to Her Majesty the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, and the Prince of Wales. And they all have one thing in common: the right to display a royal coat of arms, denoting that they're by royal appointment.
I think royal warrants are immeasurably important. Not only are you bearing the coat of royal arms above your establishment, which of course can be anything from Fortnum and Mason just up the road to the dry cleaners that either the Prince of Wales, the Duke of Edinburgh or the Queen frequents.
If you have a royal warrant, it's a huge boost to the actual business because you have that, literally, that stamp, that crown stamp of approval, which everyone realises that it's got to be a good business and good products to get that stamp.
And also, of course, royal warrants can be removed. Look at Mohammed Fayed and Harrods, and he was so annoyed when his royal warrants were removed that he sort of tore them down in a great show of flamboyance. So Harrods is now without any royal warrant whatsoever.
I mean, it is a symbol of quality, and to be endorsed by the royal family, I don't think you can put a value on that.
The warrant holders are all members of an association which liaises closely with the palace. Its secretary is a former submarine commander, Richard Peck.
Well, the royal warrant signifies that there is a satisfactory trading arrangement in place between the grantor, who Her Majesty the Queen, His Royal Highness Duke of Edinburgh, or His Royal Highness Prince of Wales, and the company. Now, within the company, there is a nominated person called the grantee. That person is responsible in all respects for the royal warrant.
But getting a royal warrant is no easy matter. It takes many years of supplying the royal family before you're eligible. And even then, you have to go through an exhaustive committee process.
Well, in order to be granted a royal warrant, a company has to first of all have provided goods or services for at least 5 years. That application is then put into the royal household, and it goes to the person, the buyer, in fact, who then makes their recommendation. It then goes in front of a committee, the Royal Household Warrants Committee, chaired by the Lord Chamberlain. They then make a recommendation, which then goes to the grantor, Her Majesty the Queen, Duke of Edinburgh, Prince of Wales, who personally sign it off, and they can reverse the decision. So it's a very personal granting, and there's a very full process through which it has to go.
The food and drink suppliers have always been some of the most important warrant holders to the palace. One of the first monarchs to grant royal warrants was King George IV, who used to entertain on a grand scale, turning his new London home, Buckingham Palace, into the gastronomic centre of England. His wine supplier then, and still providing wines and spirits to the royal family today, are Berry Brothers and Rubb.
Berry Brothers and Rudd, in one form or another, has been operating on this site for over 300 years. So, founded in 1698, the company originally sold coffee and then latterly took on cocoa and tea, snuff, spices, essentially anything that was exotic and new and interesting that was coming from the New World, and became very much a sort of London's premier grocer, and to a great extent because of its proximity to St James's Palace and the fashionable area that it was in. So one of the interesting and slightly bizarre historical documents that we have here at Berry Brothers and Rudd is a list of the weights of our customers, which go back to the mid-1700s. We had the scales here that were used to weigh produce, but then later on it became a novelty, almost like an early marketing exercise to weigh our customers, because people were interested in their weights for the same sorts of reasons people are today. But if they wanted to know their weight, they would have to pay a physician to tell them. They didn't have bathroom scales. Most people didn't even have bathrooms. And so if they shopped at Berry's, they could be weighed for free. And it just became something fun that people did, something fashionable. People would gather here and gossip, and everyone would be weighed. And then they would go for lunch, and sometimes they would come back and be weighed again. And the original ledgers go back a long way, and we can see that we have these records going back to 1765. And among them, we have the sort of great and good of the day, including Lord Byron, for instance, the poet and Regency dandy. So it's a slightly rambling and odd social document, but completely unique. We actually had our first Royal Warrant awarded in 1903 by Edward VII. And more recently than that, in the run-up to our celebration of our 300th year, we received a Royal Warrant from His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales in 1997. Now let me take you down to our cellars, where you can see some of the oldest parts of the building. So here we have a selection of wines from the family's wine collection, we call the House Reserve, and this is the oldest part of that collection, with Hungarian sweet wine Tokaj that goes back to the early 19th century. Through here you can see original William and Mary period brickwork, and this is the oldest part of our cellar, where we store fine wines that are available for sale here in the shop. The royal cellars are stocked very much with a view to what will be needed in the future, and not just what's needed at any given time. So undoubtedly there are specific events that require wines, but the people who work on the committee for the royal cellars are thinking about what wines will be required and for what function, over the next 20 to 30 years. Through here you can see some of the oldest parts of the cellar, where we still store wines that are available for sale in the shop, and we label the bins on these chalkboards to indicate what's actually stored here. And this is where we store some of the most prestigious wines that we sell, and in fact some of the most prestigious wines that are available anywhere in the world. Wines like Petrus from Pomerol, for instance, which has a massive reputation and a price tag that matches. And actually here you can see the Mouton Rothschild that Prince Charles himself did the label for, a tradition that dates back at this estate of a very long time. And he was honoured to do this label in a celebration of the Anton Cordial. Well, it's a great endorsement of the quality of your business, and for us, it's a real honour. The warrants are awarded after a minimum 5 years of providing goods or services to the royal family. And so it really shows that you have the quality and that you can sort of sustain a very high level of service in order to do that. And of course our association with the royal family is much older than our Royal Warrants, so it's a very proud association for us. One of the interesting curiosities in the shop here at St James's is this miniature wine cellar, which is part of the wine cellar that was commissioned for Queen Mary's Doll's House. So in 1920, the Queen Mary's cousin, with Sir Edwin Lutyens, started developing an idea for a very elaborately constructed doll's house that would give an indication of how the royal family may well live. And as a royal warrant holder, Berry Brothers and Rudd, or Berry Brothers and Co, as we were at the time, were asked to make a contribution in the form of the wine cellar. And so anything that was written on the bottles, these miniature bottles of wine, actually went into the bottles. So if it said Haut-Briand or Dichem or Cordon Rouge from Mum, for instance, that wine would actually be in the bottles. It's quite incredible.
Well, the late Queen Mother is always being accused of being a great tippler, which she was, and made no secret of it. And her favourite drink was actually martini, made with gin. And she also loved champagne. And at lunchtime, she always had like a half bottle of champagne by her place. But I think they started the martinis sort of 11:30 in the morning. And so everyone in the Queen Mother's household was quite well oiled.
Anton Mosimann has been cooking for the royal family for nearly 2 decades, including the much-talked-about dinner for Prince William and Catherine Middleton's wedding.
Maybe 2 gourmet spoons.
He currently holds a royal warrant for the Prince of Wales.
We've been catering for him for many, many years, and here we are. We're still very pleased and very happy and very honoured to cook for him on a regular basis. Shad, how are you doing, okay?
Yes, very good.
Good. Very good television program, huh, the other day. You've done very well.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic, well done.
Thank you.
Big star here for the Prince of Wales, huh? Princess Trust. Fantastic. Keep up the good work, okay? He's very keen on his own organic food, of course, which we are a great fan as well. And he's very keen, he's very particular what he eats, and he knows exactly what he wants. He's a very good customer for us. He knows the ifs and buts, which is always very pleasing if you have customers who know their food. Now, I want this risotto to be running over the ladle. So not too thick, not too thin. And the color has to be café au lait, milk coffee color. When you cook for His Royal Highness or the royal family, there's also a challenge around the corner because you never quite know. You go outside, have a strange kitchen, you have to transport the food, the produce, you never quite know. But it's great fun, and it's a great honor for me especially. After all those years, I was cooking for the Queen Mother, the Queen, and Prince Charles, and now Prince William. So it's 4th generation, so I'm very, very happy, very pleased. You see now the color, and that's the texture I like to have for the risotto. But it's not too thin, and it's just running over the ladle. Perfect.
One of the firm favourites of the royal family are chocolates, and Prestat are known to be a guilty pleasure of both the late Queen Mother and the present Queen. The current owners are former filmmaker Nick Crean and his half-brother and former journalist Bill Keeling.
We have a Queen's warrant, and we have a Queen's warrant as purveyor of chocolates. It's actually the second warrant we have because we were incredibly lucky. We had the Queen Mother's warrant, and we got that very late in her life. But it was a great privilege to actually be I think the only chocolate business with 2 warrants at one moment. But we still have a Queen's, and we've had it for coming up for nearly 40 years. So that's very fantastic.
rumour has it that the royal family, like all good families, has a relatively sweet tooth, and for many years had been eating chocolates, and that another purveyor of goods to the royal family used to bring in treats to the young queen, and those treats were Prestat, and then the queen became enamoured of Prestat chocolates and very kindly began to buy them direct from us rather than waiting for the other warrant holders' company to bring them to her.
But one of the things we do, and is a bit naughty of us, is every year when we produce a really monstrously delicious Easter egg, we sneak inside a little white rabbit, because rumour has it that as much as the Queen is a great aficionado of dark chocolate, she also has a sneaky little taste for white chocolate.
The Queen Mother loved chocolates, and she liked them with soft centres. So if she ever bit into a chocolate and it had a hard centre, she'd take it out of her mouth and put it on the mantelpiece so that she could then give it to the corgis. And apparently lined up on her mantelpiece were all these sort of little bits of chocolate with the hard centres waiting to be given to the corgis.
In the States, they love Prestat and they love the royal connection. There is this slight element of they're shaking the hand of the person who has made the chocolate that the Queen has then eaten. I mean, there's certainly that sort of madness of connection. They think we're extremely English, they think we sound extremely English, and they just love the eccentricity of it. Well, I mean, you can lie in bed and you can have a little fantasy about some chocolate you've never tried. And then you sort of get to the factory and just say, oh, I've had this marvellous idea, and we have a little meeting, and Gabby, who's head of production, comes in, and you say, why do you try out orange and frankincense, or lime and praline, or whatever your particular mad idea has been at the moment? Sometimes they're absolutely disgusting, but quite often they work. There aren't many businesses where you can actually, from thought to retail, I mean, you can go right through, and that's fantastic.
I dream chocolates the whole time. We have one shop, but I have about 20 shops in my dreams. And they're quite often stress-related dreams, but anyway, they're good fun. No, it's okay.
Well, I think if you're going to look for something special as a consumer, if you can go to Prestat and buy a box of chocolates that you know the Queen enjoys and you know that she enjoys that because it's bearing the royal arms, well, that's special. Bury Brothers, you might not be able to afford the very wine that they drink in the palace, but that store bears the emblem, the seal of royal approval above its door. And I would imagine that that makes that door far more enticing than perhaps one might say Oddbins.
Well, we live in a world of brands, and brands matter. And I think if you've got a stamp of approval for the royal family with a royal warrant, your company's going to be going places. It also shows that that company's in pretty good financial state too. There's no way a royal family would give you a royal warrant unless your company was trading well and had a good balanced books.
Family are big lovers of cheese, especially the Prince of Wales, who's awarded his royal warrant to Paxton and Whitfield in London, one of the oldest and most respected cheese shops in the country.
Currently, we hold 2 royal warrants for both the Prince of Wales and Her Royal Highness the Queen. We've held the Queen since 2001 and the Prince of Wales since 1997. But our relationship with the Royal Warrant Holders Association dates back to Queen Victoria in 1850, and then several kind of monarchs through the years since. So yeah, it's been a fairly long and established relationship for us. I mean, we moved in 1894, so it's a fair old time we've been here. We were at number 19 German Street prior to that, actually, and then before that, pre-1797, we were a market stall in Aldwych. So we've been here, yeah, for just over 100 years.
The Queen likes simple cheeses, nothing too strong, because she's always very conscious of the fact that she'll be speaking to people and she doesn't want to smell of any kind of food whatsoever, hence the reason she doesn't ever eat garlic. But she's not really a gourmet. Prince Charles is the one that really is very, very fussy about what he eats, and it's got to be organic, and he's got to know where it's sourced, and he's extremely appreciative of good cooking.
So these are our well, maturing rooms right down under German Street here, in fact. So let me bring you in. I mean, we keep all sorts of different things in here from, you know, you have Grana Padano, Parmesan there. We have some lovely cheese actually from up on the Balmoral estate in Scotland, actually. It's the only cheese to be produced up on the Balmoral estate. This is a Cambus au Mai. But it's not dissimilar to a small cheddar truckle, I guess. It's eaten a bit younger. It's about 9 months. A really good cheese, this. Quite a new cheese. All sorts of different things. I mean, we've got all of our cheddars under here, probably the longest aging cheeses that we do. You can see the make dates on there, in fact. So this is from October 2010, so it's 18 months old, that now. I've had the honour to meet the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. They came into the shop on an official state visit, and yeah, I mean, they're very, very charming people. They're quite normal in a way when I met them, if you like. I don't mean average, but you know, I mean, you know, just regular nice people. They're really interested in the cheese that we met. I've not met Her Highness the Queen, but yeah, it makes me very proud.
Well, Prince Charles particularly enjoys tradition, artisan crafts. He likes supporting local industries, local trades. And I think where that's important is by bearing the royal coat of arms, he's actually putting smaller industries or one-off shops on the map, whereas they might not otherwise be there.
Back in the 18th century, when King George III was suffering from porphyria, bringing on bouts of madness, his faithful footman, Mr. Fortnum, left the palace to set up a small grocery business in Piccadilly in London. Today, it's still serving the royal family and has become one of the most famous department stores in the world.
The warrants from the Prince of Wales, and especially from Her Majesty, mean a great deal. We were one of the first companies to receive a warrant from Her Majesty in 1953 when she re-established the royal household. And it's very important to us. That continuity, that longevity, that relationship is extremely important to Fortnum and Mason. We have a member of staff who just deals with Buckingham Palace and the various palaces, and it's rather wonderful that we're able to dedicate him to their service. I think the Royal Warrant allows customers to be part of this royal experience, I suppose. If they can't have tea with the Queen, they might be able to have the Queen's tea at home and the Queen's biscuits, and who knows, maybe even the Queen's dog biscuits for their family hound. We get a lot of questions about what's the Queen's favourite blend of tea, and of course we're not allowed to say, but I can say that we sell a smoky Earl Grey, and we created that smoky Earl Grey because a certain customer down the road requested that we sell a smoky Earl Grey tea.
Recently, the Queen, the Duchess of Cornwall, and the Duchess of Cambridge all visited the store as a thank you for its years of royal service.
I can't tell you what good publicity it was for the shop. We couldn't have dreamt that it would be as wonderful and as worldwide as it was. By lunchtime on the day of the visit, we had reports coming in from Australia and America and across the globe. It was just fantastic, and we are so grateful to her for putting Fortnum's once more on the global map. It was marvellous, and a very, very happy day.
When the Queen and Camilla and Kate all went to Fortnum's together, it was a first. Historically, it's a first. I don't remember anything like that ever happening to Diana. And of course, it was a tremendous marketing, PR for Paul Fortnum, especially as the Queen wore an outfit in Fortnum's blue.
But it was most importantly an opportunity for this trio each of the generations of the future to be seen by the public, to come and endorse a British establishment. And when we're talking about Royal Warrants, for me, certainly, Fortnum and Mason really does stand out as the creme de la creme, and they were there to endorse that.
Throughout history, the royal family's clothes have been a source of fascination, gossip and emulation. Nearly every aspect of their wardrobe is on public display, whether private or ceremonial. And both the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh and the Prince of Wales take great pride in awarding their warrants to some of the best British craftsmen around. One of them is the shoemaker John Lobb, still run today by a fourth generation of the family.
Well, the firm was founded by my great-grandfather, in the middle of the 19th century. He obtained the first royal warrant from the Prince of Wales after he came back to London in 1863, I suppose, sometime after that. And we held that warrant until he died, of course. But we've still got the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Edinburgh. We're very proud of the royal warrants. They mean a great deal. They set a standard of excellence, as all warrant holders do. And so it gives you something to aim at, of course, to keep up, because you've got to keep earning it. It doesn't just stay there. You've got to earn it every few years. Right, if we come downstairs here, we keep our customers' shoes here if they're waiting. Come and collect them. Let's find a nice one for you to look at. There we are, classical shoe. Oxford, waiting for the customer.
There's a lot of pairs here.
A lot of pairs, yeah. Well, sometimes they have quite a long time, but we make a lot of shoes, fortunately.
In 2009, the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall visited Lobb's in recognition of its royal service. In fact, the Prince still wears a pair of shoes that were made for him in its workshop 40 years ago.
Well, we're always often asked what the difference is between a handmade shoe and a ready-made shoe. And in a way, they're as different as chalk and cheese. You go into a store and you buy something, you put it on, you walk out. You come in here and you choose exactly what you want. It's made specifically for you, to your own measurements. And it's made entirely by hand. Every pair of shoes that we make is an individual pair for that particular customer. Through here we have the last racks where we keep the customers' lasts when we store them.
How many lasts do you have here?
Well, we've up to about, I don't know, we have about 15,000 pairs of last here. And fortunately we keep making new ones. We're often asked how long shoes last, and it's a difficult question to answer because you can't obviously tell. It depends so much what conditions they come under. But we do have shoes that come to us after many, many years. They come back for repair periodically, which we always recommend. And we've had shoes coming back that are now 30, 40, even 50 years. And even they're sent to us after a customer's died because it's still in such good nick and they don't want to throw them away. We have some famous customers, get the last of a few of them. Who have we got here? Calvin Klein, that's it. There we are, Duke Ellington. He's rather well known, there we are. Some of them rather rich, Onassis. Guess that's a name people know. Who was that? Oh no, Onassis, yes, Aristotle Onassis again.
And Sinatra's above, I think the shelf above.
Yeah, there we are, Frank Sinatra.
And they're quite small feet.
Yes, not too big. No, he wasn't too big, but okay. It's not exactly a work of art, but it's a craft, and as long as it can continue, as long as there are people who can afford it, we aim to continue. They've dwindled a bit, these nobilities. There's a rather well-known one, the Princess of Wales, of course. I certainly sense that I'm carrying on a tradition that my great-grandfather started, and I hope that I have two sons working with me, so the tradition hopefully carries on.
Hats go in and out of fashion, but for the royal family, they're a constant. Whether it's royal ascot, a garden party at Buckingham Palace, or a shooting weekend in Scotland, the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, and the Prince of Wales have always led the way when it comes to headwear. The Hatters, by royal appointment, are Locks in London's St James.
We were founded in 1676, and we've been in this actual shop, this location, since 1759. It's still owned by the original family, descendants of James Locke himself. At the moment we hold two royal warrants, one for the Duke of Edinburgh and one for the Prince of Wales. We make them various hats, from everything from leisure wear to city wear and formal wear. We've made hats for various members of the royal family over the years, and last year for the royal wedding we had several hats, several of the ladies' hats as well as gentlemen's top hats going to that wedding. In this cabinet are some of our most important historical items in the shop. Here we've got one of our most interesting pieces, which is actually a block that we used for the coronation to resize the crown for the current Queen. So we made that, sent it to Gerard, the royal jewellers, to enlarge the actual crown. Here is an original hat that was owned by the Duke of Wellington that he wore, that we made quite a few years ago. Ascot's our biggest time of year, arguably. In the men's section, it's all of the top hats. So obviously in the royal enclosure, men have to be wearing top hats along with their morning suits, and so we fit lots and lots of top hats every day in the sort of month leading up to Ascot. Lots of polishing, fitting, all sorts of things, and then up in the workroom they are making all day and all night, preparing hats for ladies, re-dyeing to go with certain outfits. So yeah, Ascot's quite a hectic time of year. Here are a few of our historical hats. You've got a couple of bicorns up here made in the early 1800s, through to First World War and Second World War hats. And then this is one of the Queen's personal bodyguard hats, which looks quite a lot like a beefeater's hat, but they don't particularly like being mixed up with them. That's quite a solid sort of a hat there. You've got some head shapes from old customers of ours. So you've got the Duke of Windsor, you've got Evelyn Waugh, Charlie Chaplin, and for better or for worse, Lord Lucan. These are many of our hats. This is how we store all of them. So from the simple trilbies and fedoras, all the way through to Panamas and all sorts. And of course, not to forget, our favourite, the historical bowler, which we designed and made in 1849 for the Earl of Leicester, who wanted a new sort of hat for his gamekeepers to wear when they were riding around his estate, which became obviously a hat worn by the masses, and then, of course, with all of the city gentlemen throughout the Victorian era, right up to sort of the 50s and 60s, people wearing those. Finally, we of course have our lovely top hats. This is one of the ones that we make now, beautiful out of rabbit fur felt, and we still in fact sell the old silk top hats, which haven't been made for about 50 years. These are beautiful, and we can take them, refurbish them. They look lovely, perfect to wear for weddings, Ascot, or just tooling around town.
That we see at major state occasions are an important part of pomp and ceremony of the royal calendar. Gieves and Hawkes of Savile Row in London have been making uniforms for the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, and the Prince of Wales for many years, as well as the ceremonial dress for the Queen's bodyguard and other high-ranking officers.
Royal warrants sort of speak for themselves. They say what they're for. For the Queen, it's livery and military wear. We can't really talk specifically about the uniforms or civilian wear that we make for the royals, but we have a long association of making uniforms for them, and we continue to do so for both the senior members of the royal family and indeed other members of the royal family, and we're very proud to do that. Right, so this is the Robert Gieves archive room, and as you can see, it's a splendid room with many uniforms from across the different services. A beautiful collection of uniforms representing 300 years or so of military tailoring. Over here, we've got a fantastic invention of Gieves in pre-war, pre-First World War. This is the life-saving waistcoat, and we have a number of testimonials to its effectiveness in the First World War, saving many lives. Around here, we've got a fabulous example of a frock coat that belonged to Earl Spencer, who's the grandfather of Princess Diana. I mean, look at the magnificent embroidery on that cuff. It's absolutely amazing. And as we go around here, this also belonged to Earl Spencer, his cape and boots. And we move round to here, another invention, this time from the hawk side of the business. This is the solar tope, a cork hat that became the standard wear for soldiers in a tropical environment. Over here on the table, I mean, this spectacular uniform belongs to Her Majesty's bodyguard, the Honourable Corps of Gentlemen-at-Arms. They have a 500-year history, celebrating their 500th anniversary in 2009. First set up to be the royal bodyguard for Henry VIII. I mean, the embroidery on here is quite spectacular, and these epaulets with this very fragile gold are very difficult to look after. Some of the uniforms go back to Victorian times. The hats there, the helmet they wear, this is swan plumes. And finally here is another example of a splendid uniform, again belonging to Earl Spencer. Amazing embroidery on the cuff. This is called a full dress tunic. Again, the oak sleeve embroidery on here, and the cross belt, which has got gold thread in it. It's a really spectacular example of military tailoring. Another interesting thing that we do at Gieves & Hawkes, we maintain the uniforms for the gentlemen-at-arms. These are the Queen's bodyguard. They're the closest bodyguard for the monarch. They were set up in 1509 as the royal bodyguard for Henry VIII, and they've continued unbroken for 500 years. They are all retired army officers. And they're a ceremonial guard now, and you'll see them on all state occasions, important occasions, and they're the gentlemen that wear the gold helmets with the swan plumes, and they're very distinctive. The uniforms, some of them date back to the Victorian era, and it's quite a job to keep them looking good to the present day.
The royal warrants are issued personally by each of the members of the royal family that is allowed to issue them. And from our experience, it is a very personal choice. And therefore, they're very keen to make sure that standards are upheld. And there is quite a real intimacy to holding a royal warrant. It's not just handed out, it is handed out for a reason. And, you know, your standards have to be maintained.
The warrant holders are very careful what they say because they don't want their warrant removed. Now, if they start sort of spilling state secrets and saying, well, they love to eat this and they love to drink that and they can't bear that, A, it could be embarrassing to any potential host or hostess, and B, it's personal and they just don't discuss anything personal. So much easier to zip the lip rather than say the wrong thing.
running of the main royal residence, Buckingham Palace, has always been a focus for royal warrant holders. Whether it's the flowers, the furniture, or even the chimneys. Peter Smith has a royal warrant from Her Majesty the Queen to provide the flowers for the palace.
The biggest orders are normally state visits. That can be a lot of flowers. In general, week to week, it's some for the palace and generally a reception a week.
So do people treat you differently now?
A few people have been bowing to me in the market, and they'd started calling me Sir all of a sudden. They used to call me other names before that, but now it's Sir. Okay, right, Jack, you can load 4 seasons and 45. Jamie, Dutch can go on now. You can start with that, stand in order first, on first.
Tell me about the hours that you do here.
We got in at 12:30 at night, and we'll probably leave for home about 10:30 in the morning. So we lead a upside down life. We're up all night and we sleep all day, with luck. This is a sort of average size order for a normal sort of Monday for the palace. About this sort of quantity. Murder on your barnet.
While Peter takes care of the flowers for Buckingham Palace, Jennifer Emery's company, Edward Goodyear, have been supplying the personal flowers for Her Majesty the Queen for over 50 years.
I, for obvious reasons, can't tell you what flowers she loves, but I can tell you that she's a great lover of flowers and gardens. She's also very knowledgeable about them and loves to walk around with the gardeners, for instance, and she has great interest in flowers.
How does it feel to have a royal warrant?
Well, I was very proud to get it, to be honest. I worked in the market 35 years. Since I left school, I've done from the bottom, I've gone up till I run my own business, and it sort of feels like I've been rewarded for it, really. A lot of hard work, and it's something to cherish.
And do the lads get a kick out of delivering to the palace?
The one who does, I think, likes it. Well, he goes inside Buckingham Palace once or twice a week, and couldn't get in this morning.
Well, I got in there, but I couldn't walk round where I was trying to pick up.
Yeah.
It's been refurbished downstairs.
Yeah, all the floor was up, so you had to leave it somewhere else.
But that's quite a fun delivery, isn't it? I mean, going to the palace in the morning.
Yeah. I quite like going over, so I go over occasionally and have a meeting with the florist and discuss what's coming up, what's wanted, what's around, and what events are coming, what might go well here or there. And occasionally, you know, I really like that. I go in the palace, I go and sit in there and have a cup of coffee and overlooking the parade ground or the front of the palace. Really quite a special thing, privileged thing to do.
Another important aspect of palace life is the furniture. Neil Stevenson's company has been making and restoring all manner of chairs, tables, cabinets and other pieces for Her Majesty the Queen for many years.
We make a wide range of things for the household, so that includes furniture for the private apartments and then general kind of maintenance elements as well. The range of things we've produced has been tremendous, and particularly with the fire at Windsor, there was widespread destruction. There was only one piece of furniture lost, which was the state dining room sideboard, which was 19 feet long. It was made in Rio rosewood and oak and gilded, originally designed by Augustus Pugin. And we had to replicate that using only some photographs and some descriptions. And that was a fantastic piece to do, and probably one of the finest pieces of furniture we've actually made. When somebody asks you what you do and you tell them you're a furniture maker, and then they might say to you, well, have you made anything for anybody famous? And you go, well, you know, it depends what you define as famous. You know, you tell them we've made furniture for the Queen. It does tend to make them sit up a little bit and take you a little more seriously as a craftsman. They don't tend to then just think you know, stand around in a shed somewhere nailing bits of wood together.
One of the more unique Royal Warrants was awarded to Rosie Hughes, who makes the floral nosegays that the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh carry at the Maundy service every year.
The reason for a nosegay is to take away all the smells and the odours, body odours. Going back 800 years, well over 800 years ago, that they would have had something made up of just herbs and small flowers.
Rosie Hughes is the most delightful character, and she's right at the other end of the scale in terms of size of company. She works for herself, or she's a very small business, and she really typifies the English approach and the tradition and the attention to detail. And if you've ever seen any of Rosie's beautiful work, you will see just what attention to detail there is in her creations.
Another small operation are Rowland's Wheelwrights, based down in Devon, who build and repair the coaches and wheels for Her Majesty the Queen. It's a two-man operation, and they do things in an old-fashioned, time-honoured tradition.
It is a father and son operation. They use very traditional techniques that have been around for hundreds of years. Interestingly, they still build carriages by eye without any plans at all, which is a most incredible skill. The last carriage they built, I believe, was 5 or 6 years ago. The principal work that they do now is in maintaining those carriages. So the carriages you see in the royal procession will probably have been worked on by Rowlands.
There are 10 main royal residences, with dozens of fireplaces and chimneys. The man whose job it is to sweep them is Royal Chimney Sweep Kevin Giddings.
Afternoon. 10 years ago, we got a royal warrant from Her Majesty the Queen, so we are now royal warrant holders to Her Majesty the Queen. We say sweep chimneys with the traditional methods of brushes and vacuum cleaners. The brushes do all the work, and a vacuum cleaner keeps it clean and tidy. We have a special soot cloth in the front of the fireplace itself to make certain it's clean and tidy, and so just keep everything under control.
I'm sure he won't mind me saying that he comes straight out of the 18th century. He's a real character, and it's one of the really wonderful things about the Royal Warrant Holders Association is that you do get characters like Kevin Giddings.
We've been to lots of different palaces. Obviously for the Queen we do all the London palaces, Clarence House, St James's Palace, Kensington Palace, and we also do other National Trust properties and historical palaces. Afternoon, everybody.
Behind the crowds, the headlines, and the pomp and ceremony, the British royal family is a busy, modern organisation. And it couldn't function properly without those it has personally chosen to supply it. The Royal Warrant Holders play a vital and important role in the day-to-day running of the palace machine, a role they are very proud to do.
Well, compared to other brands, Apple, for example, the Royal Warrant is always going to be leagues ahead. You cannot buy the Royal Warrant. You can't put a price on it. It is unique, it's historic, it carries a weight that none of its competitive brands can measure up against. So it makes it very, very special.
Well, the Royal Family brand, the House of Windsor brand, is probably at its zenith at the moment. The Queen's Diamond Jubilee is going to be a magnificent year. The whole focus of the world really is going to be on London with the Olympics and the Jubilee celebrations. So I don't think there's been a better time to be somebody who supports the royal family, or even if you're a company that's got a royal warrant, to be trading.
I think people respect her, and it's the fact that for most people's memory, she's always been there. It's the continuity of the monarchy and especially the Queen.
The Royal Warrant is in very good health because the companies that hold the Royal Warrant are very, very keen to remain at the top of their game. And the only way that a company will remain at the top of their game is through innovation, entrepreneurship, which is exactly what the Royal Warrant promotes. So I believe it's got an incredibly important future.